Never get used to this. Never normalize this. Never stop being shocked. As I speak, around 100 Palestinians are believed to have been killed in a school in Gaza. But who even knows what the final death toll will be? Slaughtered in a school, dozens of them women and children, but also many men who have committed no other crime than being Palestinian. Now, as many of you slept in your beds, these Palestinian civilians were being burned to death. Some instantly killed, some suffering excruciating, terrifying deaths. It came just after hours of Joe Biden's administration releasing 6,500 munitions and providing £3.5 billion worth to buy more bombs. And you have to wonder, don't you, whether these two things are related. The Israeli state, knowing as it is that it's protected by impunity, by the support of the USA, thinks it can get away with anything. And guess what? So far it has. We need to talk about this. We need to talk about this a lot. But first, let's listen to a report from Al Jazeera's Hani Mahmoud about what happened and the context.
And this is the fifth school in a row. That's an average of one school every 2 days, and every school, a part of them, the fact that it's designed as a learning setting, not equipped, not prepared for a large number of people in terms of sanitation, hygiene, in terms of a space. 1,000 students maximum, or a couple thousand in larger areas. But 6,000, 7,000 people crammed in a small space, sheltering from the horror of the war. And that's the case of this school, a Tabarin school in a Darj neighborhood in the northern eastern part of Gaza City, where close to 100 people were killed and dozens of other injuries that arrived to the hospital. Up till this moment, there's still more people being removed from the bombed sites, and 80 bodies so far have been identified. There are 20 left that without any identification whatsoever right now. These are the 20 of intact bodies, but the horrific fact, there are at least an estimation of 15 bodies that arrived in pieces, completely shredded. They either arrived in plastic bags or they were wrapped in a blanket just to get them to the hospital. There is no way to identify these bodies whatsoever. Family members who had other family members or children or relatives inside this school sheltering arrived to the Baptist Ahli Hospital to identify the bodies, but just the severe burns, the fact that they arrive in pieces, make it very difficult for them to identify. They're looking for every possible sign. It could be a mark on the body or from the shape of certain body parts to identify them. And this is the level of what people are reaching in order to identify these bodies and then offer them a proper burial. But this is not happening. All of this happened without any prior warning whatsoever. Anyone with a bit of logic would imagine that a situation like that will be many precautionary steps are taken to avoid this large civilian casualties. But judging from what happened and from the past incidents, the Israeli military is not interested in cutting down on the level of civilian casualties. It looks more of a deliberate attacks. It's more of a wholesale of civilian mass killing of civilians across the Gaza Strip. And it didn't happen once, it happened more than one time.
How can Israel be so brazen, so wanton in its slaughter, you may ask? And the simple answer is it knows it can get away with almost anything because it has the support, patronage and assistance of the world's only superpower. Now, the IDF has spread their usual propaganda about Hamas and Islamic Jihad commanders operating in the school. First, we'll just take this on its own terms. Under international law, under the laws of war, you cannot simply blow up civilian infrastructure full of civilians and knowingly kill huge numbers of civilians. Any attack has to be proportionate to a military aim. They claim that these jihadis, Hamas or Islamic Jihad, were using the compound to carry out terrorist attacks. Where? Where exactly? In Israel? Where are all the Hamas and Islamic Jihad attacks on Israel since the 7th of October? What possible imminent threat to Israeli civilians can be claimed to justify wiping out dozens of Palestinian civilians? We also know from the work of, for example, the Israeli Palestinian media outlet Plus 972 magazine that the Israeli state routinely justifies hitting targets it knows where there are huge numbers of civilians including on the basis of a single Hamas commander, including low-level Hamas commanders. However, they have actually defined that. In any case, we know that the Israeli authorities lie and lie and lie and lie again. After each of these atrocities, they lie, they deflect, they muddy the waters, they turn the truth upside down, they gaslight, they hope everyone moves on, and then eventually the truth comes out when attention is elsewhere in many cases. This has happened again and again and again and again. Now, in a previous attack on a school, there have been so many attacks on schools, of course, they released a list of supposed Hamas fighters. And do you know what? One of those they named included an 8-year-old Palestinian boy. Israel has attacked school after school after school. Schools where Palestinian civilians who have been forcibly displaced over and over and over again are sheltering because there is nowhere safe in the killing fields of Gaza. This is a genocide. The strategy of the Israeli state is that they do not want the Palestinian people to be there, to exist. They think that the Palestinian people are an inherent problem, and they work backwards from that point, but with the limits imposed by Western public opinion turning on the Western states, which provide Israel with the arms, diplomatic support and aid it needs to continue its murderous occupation and oppression and its genocide in Gaza. Based on the limits there, it has achieved an astonishing amount. It has butchered tens of thousands. We don't know how many. We know that in these situations, it's not the violence which kills most people, it's other causes, like the total destruction of the healthcare system, for example. Imagine in, say, Britain or the US, every single hospital was destroyed without there even being a war at the same time, an invasion. That itself would impose a catastrophic death toll on our nations. That's why, that's just one factor, we've had one estimate of senior medical experts who sent in their estimate to the Lancet magazine, the most prestigious health magazine publication on earth. They estimated 186,000 Palestinians already killed out of a pre-war population in Gaza, around 2.2 or 2.3 million. Gaza is being made deliberately inhospitable. Its people are being terrorized. The basis of the strategy is to make Gaza a place which in the long term is emptied of the Palestinian people. Now, look, I am glad that Joe Biden is not going to be the Democratic nominee. He is a monster, a butcher, who has facilitated one of the great crimes of our age. This genocide was made possible by that man and his administration. And I understand the great danger and evil posed by Donald Trump, and that includes the threat he poses himself to the Palestinian people. But let me just replay how Kamala Harris, now the Democratic nominee, responded to anti-genocide protesters in Detroit, Michigan, the other day.
You know what? If you want Donald Trump to win, then say that, otherwise I'm speaking.
Now, some responded to that by going, yes, Queen, she showed them, much presidential, rah, rah, rah. I'll tell you, I was disgusted by it, and everyone who cheered that on is lower than pond life. They don't think Palestinians are human beings. They can't do. You wouldn't respond like that if you did. How messed up do you have to be to cheer that on? There are people protesting here. Those people protesting kids being incinerated in schools. That's what they were yelling about. They were yelling about the mass slaughter of the Palestinians facilitated by US administration, which includes the Vice President, Kamala Harris. Now, she had a better response to protesters in Arizona, where she spoke about respecting them.
Which includes respecting the voices that I think that we are hearing from. And let me just say this on topic of what I think I'm hearing over there. Let me just speak to that for a moment, and then I'm going to get back to the business at hand. So let me say, I have been clear. Now is the time to get a ceasefire deal and get the hostage deal done. Now is the time. And the president and I are working around the clock every day to get that ceasefire deal done and bring the hostages home.
So she clearly knew that insulting a large swathe of her base was a big mistake, and indeed the polling shows that a large majority of Democratic voters believe Israel is committing genocide. But the formulation she's using there is pretty much the same as Joe Biden, which is talking about getting a ceasefire deal and the hostages out. That's been the same formulation. It hasn't achieved anything other than continued mass slaughter, unless the US puts active pressure on Israel, including not providing it with weapons to murder people, this will never stop. Now, I know US progressives are just desperate to stop Trump. I get that. But pressure has to be brought on Kamala Harris. She can't just bank people who oppose genocide and therefore think she has no incentive to do anything about that. This is one of the great atrocities of our age. It is a genocide facilitated from the start by the US administration. And I know now, with Biden gone, there was a sense of excitement among many in the United States about the possibility of stopping Trump. But don't throw the Palestinian people under a bus. They are being butchered in great numbers every single day. And unless pressure is brought on whoever ends up in the White House, then that mass murder, that genocide will never stop. Please like, please subscribe. Please leave your comments, your thoughts. Listen to us on the podcast. Keep the show on the road at patreon.com/OwenJones84. I'll speak to you soon.